What if the man you built a life with, the father of your child, dismissed your entire existence with 7 soul-crushing words? For Elena, a trip to the bank with her husband Richard and their 5-year-old son Leo turned into a public nightmare. In front of a stranger, Richard didn't just deny their marriage, he reduced her to a biological function. "She's not my wife," he said with chilling indifference. "Just a surrogate." That single sentence ignited a firestorm, a battle for her identity, her dignity, and her son. This is the story of how a mother's love, pushed to the brink, proved that she was anything but just a surrogate. It's the story of how that night the man who denied her lost everything. The air in the downtown branch of Sterling National Bank was cool and sterile, smelling faintly of industrial carpet cleaner and old money. It was a place of hushed transactions and quiet importance, the kind of establishment Richard Vance felt perfectly at home in. For Elena, it always felt like she was an actress on a set she hadn't been properly briefed for. She smoothed down the skirt of her simple but elegant navy dress, a nervous habit she'd developed over 7 years of marriage to a man born into a world of casual opulence. Their son Leo, a boisterous 5-year-old with Richard's dark hair and her bright, curious eyes, was starting to squirm. "Mommy, can I have a lollipop? Mr. Henderson has a jar." "We'll see, sweetie," Elena murmured, tucking a stray curl behind his ear. "Let's just finish up with Daddy." Richard wasn't paying attention. He was scrolling through his phone, his thumb flicking impatiently across the screen. He hadn't wanted to come. "It's just opening a trust account for Leo's education, Elena. The advisors can handle it." But Elena had insisted. She believed in doing these things as a family, in creating small, shared traditions out of life's milestones, even the boring ones. She felt the glue that held them together, a bond more essential than the Vance family fortune. Lately, she'd felt that glue beginning to lose its hold. They were finally called to a polished mahogany desk where a kind-faced, middle-aged clerk named Brenda was waiting. Her nameplate was positioned neatly beside a computer monitor. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance, I'm Brenda. So pleased to meet you," she said with a warm smile, her eyes crinkling. "And who is this handsome young man?" "I'm Leo," their son announced, puffing out his chest. Brenda chuckled. "Well, Leo, it's a pleasure. We're just setting up a little nest egg for you today." Richard gave a perfunctory nod, still more engaged with his phone than the human beings in front of him. Elena's smile felt brittle. She handled the initial pleasantries, her voice a soft counterpoint to the clacking of Brenda's keyboard. They went through the paperwork, a blizzard of numbers and legal jargon. Elena signed where indicated, her hand flowing in the practice script of Elena Vance. Finally, Brenda turned to a particular form. "All right, just a few final details. This is our family legacy package, which links all of your accounts and offers certain benefits. I just need to confirm the primary and secondary account holders. So Mr. Vance and Mrs. Vance," she gestured towards Elena, "as his wife and the mother of the child." Richard looked up from his phone, his expression one of mild annoyance, as if Brenda had asked a particularly stupid question. He let out a short, dismissive sound that was not quite a laugh. "Oh," he said, his voice carrying in the quiet bank. "She's not my wife." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Elena's heart stopped. She stared at Richard, her mind refusing to process the statement. She could feel Brenda's professional smile falter, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. Leo, sensing the sudden sharp shift in the emotional atmosphere, looked from his father to his mother. Brenda, ever the professional, tried to recover. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I must have misunderstood the—" Richard cut her off, waving a dismissive hand towards Elena without even looking at her. The gesture was like one you'd use to point out a piece of furniture. "She's just the surrogate." Just the surrogate. 7 words. 7 words that vaporized 7 years of marriage, a decade of shared life, the agony of infertility, the miracle of a successful IVF transfer, and 9 months of carrying their son under her own heart. Each word was a perfectly polished stone dropped into the placid pool of her life, and the ripples were devastating. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. The hushed whispers of the bank seemed to amplify into a roar in her ears. She wasn't Mrs. Vance. She wasn't a partner. She wasn't the woman he loved. She was a vessel, an incubator, a service provider, and he had just announced it to a complete stranger with the same casual air he might use to say, "She's just here to fix the air conditioning." Brenda's face was a mask of horrified pity. She looked at Elena, then at Richard, then down at the paperwork, her hands hovering uselessly over the keyboard. The space for wife's signature seemed to mock Elena from the page. "I see," Brenda stammered, her gaze fixed firmly on her monitor. Leo tugged on Elena's sleeve. "Mommy, what's a surrogate?" Elena couldn't breathe. She couldn't form a word. She looked at Richard, her eyes pleading with him to take it back, to laugh and say it was a bizarre, terrible joke. But he was already looking back down at his phone, his face a mask of cold indifference. He had said it and he meant it. He had erased her. Slowly, deliberately, Elena stood up. The movement felt heavy, as if she were wading through water. She took Leo's small hand in hers. Her own hand was ice cold. "Come on, Leo," she said, her voice a raw, shaky whisper. "We're leaving." She didn't look at Richard. She couldn't. If she looked at him, she knew she would either shatter into a million pieces or do something she would regret. She walked away from the mahogany desk, past the questioning glances of other patrons, her son trotting to keep up. "But what about my lollipop?" Leo asked, his voice full of a child's innocent confusion. "I'll buy you a whole bag, my love," Elena promised, her voice breaking on the last word. The automatic glass doors slid open and the humid city air hit her like a physical blow. She didn't stop walking until she reached their car, a sleek black Mercedes that suddenly felt like a cage. She fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking so violently she could barely fit the key in the door. She buckled a chattering Leo into his car seat, her movements jerky and robotic. She got into the driver's seat and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror. A pale, hollow-eyed stranger stared back. A few minutes later, Richard slid into the passenger seat, smelling of expensive cologne and oblivious self-importance. "What was that all about?" he asked, his tone laced with irritation. "You caused a scene, Elena." The dam broke. "I caused a scene?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a rage so profound it scared her. "You publicly disowned me, Richard. You dismissed me as if I were nothing more than a hired womb." He actually had the audacity to scoff. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It was a legal distinction. With my family's assets, everything has to be precise. You know Mother worries about these things. Calling you the surrogate is just factually accurate from a certain legal perspective." "A legal perspective," she repeated, her voice rising. "I am your wife. I am the mother of your child. I carried him. I gave birth to him. We have a marriage certificate. We have a life. Or did I imagine all of that?" "Of course you didn't imagine it," he said, finally looking at her, but his eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth she once cherished. "But you know the arrangement was always unorthodox. You know my mother, the family. They see things a certain way. It was just simpler to clarify." Simpler. It was simpler to gut her in public than to stand up to his mother. Simpler to reduce her to a biological function than to call her his wife. The drive home was a silent, suffocating ordeal. Leo, sensing the storm, had fallen asleep in the back, his head lolled to one side. Elena drove on autopilot, her mind a maelstrom of memories, their wedding day. Richard's tearful joy when the IVF finally worked his hand on her swollen belly, the moment he'd first held Leo in the hospital, whispering, thank you, my love." Where was that man? Who was this cold, callous stranger sitting beside her? They arrived at their large, impeccably decorated house in a wealthy suburb, a house that now felt like a gilded cage built by his family's money, not their shared love. Richard got out of the car and went inside without a backward glance, expecting her to unbuckle Leo and follow meekly behind. But Elena didn't move. She sat in the silence of the garage, the only sound the soft ticking of the cooling engine. She looked back at her sleeping son, his face so peaceful and innocent. He deserved a mother who was respected. He deserved a father who honored his mother. He deserved more than a life built on a foundation of legal distinctions and subservience to a cruel, calculating matriarch. Richard thought his words in the bank were just a clarification, an insignificant detail. He was wrong. They were a declaration of war. And in that moment, sitting in the sterile silence of her garage, Elena knew something with absolute certainty. This was not a scene she was causing. This was the end of the play. That night, after Richard had gone to sleep in their master bedroom, assuming her silence was acceptance, Elena moved with a quiet, determined fury. She packed 3 suitcases, 1 for her, 2 for Leo. Clothes, toys, his favorite blanket, the worn copy of Goodnight Moon. She took her laptop, her personal documents, and the photo albums, the tangible proof of the life he had just denied. She drained half the funds from their joint checking account, the one she had access to, transferring it to her personal savings. At 2 a.m., she slipped into Leo's room. She gently woke him, whispering, "Hey, sleepyhead, we're going on a little adventure, just you and me." Leo, groggy and compliant, let her dress him and lead him downstairs. As she passed the closed door to the master bedroom, she paused. There was no anger left, just a vast, cold emptiness. He hadn't just lost a wife tonight. He had lost the respect, the love, and the life they had built. She buckled Leo into the car, his suitcases tucked beside him. As she pulled out of the driveway, she didn't look back. She was driving away from the house, from the Vance name, from the man who called her a surrogate. She was driving toward an uncertain future, but for the first time in a very long time, she felt like more than just Mrs. Vance. She felt like Elena, and she had her son. That was all that mattered. The battle had just begun, and Richard had no idea of the power of the woman he had just so carelessly discarded. The headlights of Elena's car cut through the pre-dawn gloom, illuminating the quiet, tree-lined street where Chloe lived. Chloe's small, charming bungalow, with its overflowing flower boxes and brightly painted door, was more than just a house. It was Elena's sanctuary. Chloe had been her best friend since college, her maid of honor, her confidant through the brutal years of fertility treatments, and the first person after Richard to hold Leo. When Elena called her from a gas station at 3 a.m., her voice a ragged whisper, Chloe hadn't hesitated. "Don't say another word. I have the spare key under the ceramic frog. The guest room is ready. Just get here." Now, as Elena carried a sleeping Leo from the car, the front door swung open. Chloe, her fiery red hair a mess, and a thick robe tied hastily around her, enveloped them both in a fierce hug. "Get him inside," Chloe murmured, her voice thick with a mixture of sleep and concern. She took one of the suitcases, and together they settled Leo into the guest room bed, tucking him in without waking him. In the cozy, cluttered kitchen, over steaming mugs of chamomile tea, the story poured out of Elena. She recounted the scene at the bank, Richard's dismissive tone, the look on the clerk's face, his pathetic justification in the car. With each word, Chloe's expression hardened from sympathy to a cold, controlled fury. "He said what?" Chloe finally managed to say, her knuckles white around her mug. "That son of a bitch. After everything, after all those injections, the procedures, the miscarriages. For him to reduce you to that, in public. He said it was a legal distinction." Elena choked out the words, tasting like ash. "For his mother. It was always for his mother, Chloe. I was never good enough for the great Eleanor Vance. Not the right pedigree, not from old money. I was just the incubator for the Vance heir." "I never trusted that woman," Chloe seethed. "She looks at people like they're insects she's deciding whether or not to squash. And Richard, I knew he was weak, but I never thought he was cruel. He let her poison him completely." Elena finally let the tears she'd been holding back fall silent hot tracks down her cheeks. "I feel so stupid. I tried so hard to be the perfect wife to fit into their world. I hosted their charity dinners, I wore the right clothes, I pretended to be fascinated by their polo matches. And for what? to be publicly humiliated and erased. No, Chloe said, her voice firm as she reached across the table and grabbed Elena's hand. You stop that right now. You are not stupid. You are a loving, wonderful woman who tried to make a life with a spineless coward. This is not on you. This is on him. So what's the plan? The question hung in the air. Plan, Elena echoed weakly. I don't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't spend another night in that house. I couldn't look at him. Good, Chloe said, her tone shifting into strategic mode. That's the first step. You and Leo stay here as long as you need. My house is your fortress. Tomorrow we make some calls. First you need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. A shark. A dragon. Someone who will make Richard and his mother regret the day they were born. The first call from Richard came at 7:05 a.m. Elena's phone buzzed angrily on the kitchen counter. She stared at it, her heart pounding. Don't, Chloe advised. Let it go to voicemail. You don't owe him a conversation. He called 7 more times in the next hour. Then came the texts. Elena, where are you? This isn't funny. You can't just take my son. Whatever you think I did, you're overreacting. Come home and we'll talk. My mother is very upset. The last text made Elena let out a bitter laugh. Of course Eleanor was upset. Her precious grandson was missing. Around 9 a.m., an unknown number flashed on the screen. Elena, on Chloe's advice, answered it, putting it on speaker. Elena. The voice was imperious and cold as ice. Eleanor Vance. Richard tells me you've had some sort of hysterical episode and have taken my grandson. This little tantrum ends now. Bring Leo home immediately. He is not your grandson to command Eleanor, Elena said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. And he is my son. I am well aware of the biological facts, dear, Eleanor sneered. A fact Richard was simply clarifying, I understand. You've always been a bit too emotional. Now be a good girl and stop this nonsense. You wouldn't want things to get unpleasant. It was a threat cloaked in condescension. You have no idea what unpleasant is, Elena said and hung up the phone. Her hand was trembling, but she felt a surge of adrenaline. The battle lines were drawn. Chloe had already been on her laptop. I've got a name, she announced. Jessica Davenport, Davenport & Associates, specializes in high-conflict, high-asset divorces. Her nickname in the legal community is the Lioness. She eats men like Richard for breakfast. An hour later, Elena was sitting in a plush chair opposite Jessica Davenport. The lawyer was a woman in her late 40s, impeccably dressed in a steel gray suit with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through to the heart of the matter. She listened to Elena's story without interruption, her face impassive. When Elena finished, Jessica leaned forward, her hands clasped on her large oak desk. Mr. Vance's comment at the bank was not just an insult. Elena, Jessica said, her voice calm and lethal. It was a gift. In family law, we often deal in nuances, and he said, she said. Your husband, in a public setting and in front of a verifiable third-party witness, effectively denied the legitimacy of your marriage and your role as a mother. He didn't just call you a surrogate. He framed you as a transactional party, not a maternal one, in a custody dispute that is pure gold. Hope, fierce and bright, bloomed in Elena's chest for the first time in 24 hours. What does that mean for me, for Leo? It means we move fast and we move aggressively, Jessica stated. We file for an emergency ex parte hearing. We request temporary sole legal and physical custody based on the grounds of potential emotional harm to the child and Mr. Vance's demonstrated denial of your parental status. We'll cite his statement as evidence that he does not view you as an equal co-parent, which puts the child's stable environment at risk. We'll also file for a temporary restraining order to keep him and his mother away from you and Leo until the hearing. It was a whirlwind. Elena felt like she was being swept up in a current far stronger than herself, but this time it was a current pulling her toward safety, not drowning her. She signed the papers, her hand steady. The next afternoon, they were in a sterile courtroom, a far cry from the opulent bank, but infinitely more terrifying. Elena sat beside Jessica, her back ramrod straight. Richard was on the other side of the room with a slick, expensive-looking lawyer who oozed corporate confidence. Richard looked tired and angry. He kept shooting Elena looks that vacillated between pleading and fury. He couldn't believe she had done this. He couldn't believe his little, compliant wife had declared war. Jessica presented their case to the judge, a stern-looking woman with graying hair and no-nonsense glasses. She laid out the events calmly and factually, her tone conveying the gravity of Richard's words. Your Honor, Mr. Vance's statement, "She's not my wife, just a surrogate," is a fundamental rejection of the marital partnership and the maternal bond. It indicates a belief that Mrs. Vance is not a parent with equal rights but a service provider who has fulfilled her contract. This creates a toxic and unstable environment for their 5-year-old son, Leo. We believe it's in the child's best interest that he remain in the sole care of his mother, the only parent by Mr. Vance's own admission who is fully committed to her role. Richard's lawyer blustered, calling it a gross mischaracterization and a misunderstanding. He painted Elena as hysterical and impulsive, but Jessica had an affidavit from Brenda, the bank clerk. Jessica had tracked her down. The clerk, horrified by what she had witnessed and shaken by the memory of Leo's confused little face, had agreed to provide a sworn statement confirming the exact wording and the cold, dismissive manner in which Richard had delivered the lines. When the judge read the affidavit, her expression tightened. She looked over her glasses at Richard, her gaze sharp and disapproving. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet, "did you or did you not refer to your wife of 7 years, the woman who gave birth to your son, as just the surrogate in a public place of business?" Richard paled. He stammered, "Your Honor, it was taken out of context. It's a complicated family situation." "It seems quite simple to me," the judge cut in, her voice like gravel. "It shows a profound lack of respect not only for your wife but for the institution of marriage and the role of a mother. That raises serious questions about your judgment." The ruling was swift and stunning. "Temporary sole physical and legal custody is granted to the mother, Elena Vance," the judge declared. "Mr. Vance, you are to have no contact with the child until a full hearing can be scheduled. A temporary restraining order is granted. I am also ordering you to pay temporary child and spousal support effective immediately. We will revisit this in 30 days, during which time I suggest you secure a family therapist and reflect deeply on what it means to be a husband and a father." Richard's jaw dropped. His lawyer looked stunned. A gasp was audible from the back of the courtroom where Eleanor Vance had slipped in her face a mask of disbelief and incandescent rage. Elena felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled her knees. She had done it. She had protected her son. As she walked out of the courtroom, she passed Eleanor, whose eyes were slits of pure hatred. "You will regret this." Eleanor hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. We will crush you." Elena looked the older woman dead in the eye. The fear she had lived with for 7 years finally gone, replaced by something harder, something forged in the fires of betrayal. "No, Eleanor," Elena said, her voice steady and clear. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." She walked away, head held high, leaving her mother-in-law standing there momentarily speechless. She had won the first battle. But Elena knew with chilling certainty that the war had just begun. The Vances would not take this defeat lying down. They would come for her with everything they had. The 30 days that followed the court hearing were a grueling war of attrition. The Vances, true to Eleanor's threat, unleashed their considerable power not with a single dramatic cannonball, but with 1,000 insidious cuts. It was a siege designed to isolate, exhaust, and break Elena. The first front was financial. Richard, under his mother's direct command, was ruthlessly efficient. The day after the hearing, the temporary support payment was intentionally late. The joint credit cards were canceled without notice, leaving Elena embarrassed at a grocery store checkout, her cart piled high with food for Leo. The most significant blow came when she discovered the Vance family lawyers had filed a motion to freeze the main joint savings account, claiming Elena's preemptive withdrawal was a misappropriation of marital assets. Suddenly, the cushion she had secured for herself and Leo was tied up in legal limbo. "They're trying to starve you out," Jessica Davenport said during an urgent phone call. "It's a classic tactic of the wealthy spouse. They want you so desperate that you'll be forced to crawl back and accept any terms they offer. We fight it, but the courts move slowly. You need to prepare for a lean few months." Elena, who had left her promising career in graphic design to be a full-time mother at Richard's insistence, a Vance child doesn't get raised by nannies, Eleanor had decreed, was now effectively unemployed and with dwindling resources. The Vance's strategy was clear: render her powerless, then paint her as an unstable provider. She spent her nights at Chloe's kitchen table, her laptop open, frantically updating her portfolio and applying for freelance work. Rejection emails piled up. The industry had moved on in the 6 years she'd been away. Her confidence, already fragile, began to crumble under the weight of financial anxiety. There were days she ate only toast so that Leo could have his chicken nuggets and fresh fruit. The second front was social. The Vance family matriarch Eleanor was a master of the whispered word and the poisoned well. Suddenly, Elena found herself ostracized from the circle of mothers and school acquaintances she had cultivated. Invitations to playdates dried up. Polite smiles were replaced with averted eyes and hurried conversations that stopped abruptly when she approached. One afternoon, a mother she'd considered a friend, a woman named Sarah, approached her nervously in the park. "Elena," she started, wringing her hands, "I'm so sorry, but I don't think Leo can come to Oliver's birthday party on Saturday." "Oh, is everything okay?" Elena asked, a knot forming in her stomach. Sarah couldn't meet her eyes. "It's just... Eleanor Vance is a major benefactor for the hospital my husband works for. She made a call. She told people you were unstable, that you were prone to dramatic, erratic behavior, and that you'd kidnapped Leo. She implied you were after the Vance money." The words were a physical blow. They weren't just trying to take her son. They were trying to annihilate her character, to rewrite history so that she was the villain of her own story. "That's not true, Sarah," Elena said, her voice shaking. "You know me." "I know," Sarah whispered, looking miserable. "But I can't risk my husband's career. I'm so sorry." She scurried away, leaving Elena standing alone by the swing set, feeling more isolated than ever. Through it all, Leo was her anchor. He was too young to understand the legal or financial complexities, but he was exquisitely sensitive to the emotional undercurrents. He had more nightmares. He clung to her, asking for Daddy. In quiet moments, his brow furrowed with a confusion that broke Elena's heart. She created a bubble of determined cheerfulness for him. They had picnics on the living room floor, built magnificent Lego castles, and spent hours at the public library. She poured all the love and energy she had into ensuring his world felt safe and stable, even as hers was crumbling. It was in these moments that she found her resolve. Every time Leo laughed, every time he wrapped his small arms around her neck and whispered, "I love you, Mommy," it was a reminder of what she was fighting for. Meanwhile, Richard's attempts at contact were sporadic and unsettling. They were never his own. They were clearly scripted by his mother and their lawyers. He'd send stilted emails, not asking how she was, but demanding an inventory of household items. One evening, a package arrived by courier. It was a children's book about divorce. Inside, a note in Richard's handwriting read, "Maybe this will help you explain to Leo why you've broken our family apart." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He wasn't a participant in the conflict. In his mind, he was a victim of her overreaction. But the siege intended to weaken her was having an unintended effect. It was forging Elena into something new. The fear was burning away, leaving behind a core of pure, unadulterated steel. The humiliation was hardening into resolve. One night, unable to sleep, she was sorting through a box of old documents she'd taken from the house, looking for anything that might help her case. Tucked away in a folder labeled IVF, she found something she had forgotten about. It was a legal document, a draft from early in their fertility journey drawn up by the Vance family's primary lawyer. Her blood ran cold as she read it. It wasn't a standard IVF consent form. It was a co-parenting and surrogacy agreement. A very specific, very brutal one. It stipulated that in the event of a successful pregnancy where Elena carried the child, she would be recognized as the gestational carrier. It laid out terms for relinquishing certain parental rights to Richard in the event of a separation, giving him sole decision-making power over the child's education, upbringing, and inheritance. It even contained a clause that in the event of Richard's death, primary custody would transfer not to Elena but to his parents Harrison and Eleanor Vance. She remembered the day Richard had presented it to her. They were in their beautiful sunlit kitchen. He'd been casual about it. "It's just a formality, darling. Mother's lawyers are just being thorough. You know how they are. Just sign it so we can move forward." Elena, even the younger, more pliable version of herself, had been horrified. "This is insane, Richard. This document makes me sound like a broodmare. It strips me of my rights as a mother." They had their first real fight that day. He'd accused her of not trusting him, of being difficult. She had refused to sign. She had torn it up in front of him, telling him they would proceed as husband and wife or not at all. Overwhelmed by his desire for a child, he had eventually relented, and they had moved forward with the standard clinic paperwork which listed them both as intended parents. She had thought that was the end of it, that she had won. Now, looking at this draft, she realized she hadn't won. She had only postponed the battle. This document was the blueprint for their entire worldview. In their minds, she was a surrogate one who had simply refused to sign the paperwork. Richard's comment in the bank wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was the articulation of a long-held, deeply ingrained belief. She immediately called Jessica. "I've found something," she said, her voice tense with excitement. "I think I've found their playbook." Jessica's reaction was electric. "Elena, this is phenomenal. This isn't just a draft. It's a smoking gun. It demonstrates premeditation. It proves that their attempts to recharacterize you as a surrogate are not a recent fabrication in response to your leaving, but a long-standing strategy. This completely corroborates our narrative. They won't see it coming." A new twist emerged a week before the next hearing. Jessica received a call from an unknown number. It was Brenda, the bank clerk. She sounded terrified. "They found me," Brenda whispered into the phone. "A lawyer for the Vance family. He came to my house. He was very intimidating. He told me my memory of the event must be mistaken. He said Mr. Vance was under a lot of stress, and that I must have misunderstood a complex legal discussion. He suggested that it would be in my best interest to amend my affidavit, or perhaps not testify at all." "Did he threaten you, Brenda?" Jessica asked calmly. "He said that people in high places have long memories and that accusations can damage a person's career. It wasn't direct, but I knew what he meant. I have a mortgage. I have kids in college. I'm scared." "You have every right to be," Jessica soothed. "But what he did is called witness tampering, and it is a serious crime. Brenda, your testimony is crucial. It's the one piece of this puzzle that isn't from someone in the family. You are the impartial observer." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Elena, who was in Jessica's office for a strategy meeting, held her breath. "That poor woman," Brenda finally said, her voice filled with a surprising strength. "And her little boy." He asked his mom what a surrogate was. No kid should have to ask that. "I'll testify. I'm not going to let them bully me into letting them destroy that family." The pieces were falling into place. The Vances, in their arrogance, were overplaying their hand. Their attempts to intimidate and control had provided Elena and Jessica with the very weapons they needed. The night before the hearing, Elena tucked Leo into his bed in Chloe's guest room. "Mommy," he asked drowsily, "are we going to go home soon?" Elena smoothed his hair back from his forehead, her heart aching. "We are home, my love," she said softly. "Home is wherever you and I are together, and I promise you no one is ever going to take me away from you." He nodded, his eyes fluttering shut. She kissed his forehead and stood in the doorway for a long time, watching him sleep. The siege had been brutal, but she had not broken. She was no longer just defending herself. She was on the attack. Tomorrow in court she would not be the timid wife or the hysterical runaway. She would be Elena Leo's mother, and she would be the one to burn their kingdom to the ground. The air in courtroom 4B was stale and thick with a potent mixture of expensive perfume, nervous sweat, and unspoken animosity. This was a larger, more imposing chamber than the one used for the emergency hearing, its dark wood paneling and high ceilings designed to convey the gravity of the law. The gallery was peppered with onlookers. A few journalists who had caught wind of a high society scandal, and several immaculately dressed women who were clearly friends of Eleanor Vance, there to witness what they assumed would be the swift and brutal dismantling of a social upstart. Elena sat at the plaintiff's table beside Jessica Davenport, her posture a study in quiet defiance. She had deliberately chosen to wear the same simple navy dress from that fateful day at the bank. It was her armor, a silent testament to the moment that had started it all. Her hands, which had trembled for weeks, now rested calmly in her lap. She was no longer a victim of circumstances. She was the architect of this reckoning. Across the aisle, the Vance contingent was a portrait of entitled fury. Richard sat hunched between his lead counsel, a notoriously aggressive attorney named Marcus Thorne, and his mother. Eleanor Vance, draped in a severe charcoal gray suit with a diamond brooch glinting like a shard of ice at her throat, surveyed the room as if it were a poorly managed country club she was considering shutting down. Her gaze swept over Elena with a dismissive coldness that could have frozen water. Marcus Thorne began, his voice booming with manufactured confidence. His strategy was clear: bury Elena under an avalanche of financial insinuation. He called a forensic accountant to the stand, a prim man who, with the help of a dozen complex charts, proceeded to paint a picture of Elena as a cunning and materialistic schemer. He detailed her systematic withdrawals from the joint account in the weeks leading up to her departure, the value of jewelry Richard had gifted her over the years, and a luxury vacation they had taken 2 years prior. "So, as you can see, Your Honor," Thorne concluded with a flourish, "Ms. Vance's actions are consistent with a person planning a significant financial event, namely absconding with marital assets in preparation for a lucrative divorce." When it was Jessica's turn to cross-examine, she approached the witness with a deceptively calm demeanor. "Mr. Davies," she began, "you've detailed these systematic withdrawals. Could you please pull up Exhibit C, the one showing the transactions from the month before my client left her home?" The chart reappeared on the screen. "Thank you," Jessica said. "This withdrawal for $287.50 on the 4th. Where was that made?" The accountant peered at his notes. "At a Shop and Save grocery store. And this one for $89.99 on the 12th? Kids Closet, a children's clothing store." Jessica continued down the list, her voice even and methodical. "A payment to the pediatrician, a charge for Leo's tumbling class, the purchase of school supplies." "Mr. Davies, does this look like the spending pattern of a woman liquidating assets for a secret escape? Or does it look like the spending pattern of a mother buying groceries, clothes, and paying for her child's activities?" The accountant shifted uncomfortably. "Well, when viewed in isolation." "Let's view it in context then," Jessica pressed. "The grand total of these systematic withdrawals over a 6-week period was just over $4,000, correct? From an account that before being frozen by your client had a balance of nearly $200,000. "The numbers are correct," he conceded. "Thank you, Mr. Davies. No further questions." Jessica walked back to her table, having effortlessly reframed the Vance's narrative from one of greed to one of petty cruelty. They weren't just rich. They were trying to stop a mother from buying her son's school shoes. Thorne's next witness was a child psychologist, Dr. Alistair Finch, who spoke in smooth therapeutic tones about the potential trauma of parental alienation and the importance of stability. It was a clear attempt to paint Elena's flight as a selfish act that had harmed Leo. On cross-examination, Jessica leaned forward. Doctor, you speak of a stable environment. Would you agree that a core component of such an environment is mutual respect between the parents? Absolutely, Dr. Finch agreed, smiling serenely. It's paramount. And would you agree that children even at 5 years old are incredibly perceptive to emotional discord and disrespect between their parents? Yes, they are like emotional barometers. So, Jessica's voice sharpened slightly. If a child were to witness his father publicly deny that his mother is his wife and instead label her as just a surrogate, a term the child wouldn't even understand, what kind of impact might that have on the child's sense of stability and security? Dr. Finch's professional smile faltered. That would be highly confusing and distressing for a child. It would undermine the very foundation of the family unit in the child's mind. It would, in fact, be a profound act of disrespect, wouldn't you say? One that would cause significant emotional harm? Objection, Thorne called out. Counsel is leading the witness. Sustained. Rephrase, Ms. Davenport. The judge instructed, though she was watching the exchange with keen interest. Certainly, Your Honor, Jessica said. Dr. Finch, would such a statement made by a father about a mother in front of their child be considered conducive to a healthy, respectful, and stable environment? The doctor cleared his throat. No, it would be the opposite. Thank you, Doctor. The very opposite. The momentum had shifted palpably. It was now Jessica's turn to present her case. Her first call was Brenda Peters, the bank clerk. Brenda walked to the stand, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, a woman of ordinary life thrust into a high-stakes drama. Yet when she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. She recounted the events of that day, her testimony, a damningly simple recitation of the facts. Thorne attempted to dismantle her on cross-examination. Ms. Peters, you attend to dozens of clients a day. You deal with complex financial matters. Isn't it possible that you simply misheard Mr. Vance? That his words were taken out of context? Brenda looked not at Thorne, but directly at the judge. Your Honor, I have worked in customer-facing roles for my entire adult life. I know when someone is talking about finances, and I know when someone is being deliberately cruel. Mr. Vance wasn't looking at a document. He waved his hand at Mrs. Vance at Elena as if she were an object, and he said those words. They were meant to diminish her. There was no other context. Thorne, frustrated, tried a different tack. You have a personal bias, don't you? You felt sorry for Ms. Vance, and so your memory has been colored by emotion. Brenda took a deep breath. I felt sorry for her, yes. But that's not what this is about. I'm here because last Tuesday a man from your law firm, a Mr. Jennings, came to my home. He sat in my living room and told me that the Vance family were important people, and that it would be a shame if a misunderstanding were to negatively impact my career. He suggested I might want to revise my affidavit to state I couldn't clearly recall the conversation. He called it finding a more accurate memory. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Jessica rose slowly. Your Honor, I believe what Ms. Peters is describing is witness tampering. The judge's face was thunderous. She fixed her gaze on Marcus Thorne, who looked as if he'd been struck. Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice dangerously low, is a Mr. Jennings an associate at your firm? Thorne's face was ashen. He is a junior associate, Your Honor. I was not aware of his actions. It was a feeble defense, and everyone in the room knew it. The Vance's credibility was not just damaged, it was incinerated. Next, Jessica called the dragon into her own lair. The plaintiff calls Eleanor Vance. Eleanor strode to the stand, her composure a mask of granite, but Jessica could see the fury simmering just beneath the surface. Mrs. Vance, Jessica started, her tone even. You heard Dr. Finch's testimony about the importance of parental respect. Do you respect Elena as the mother of your grandson? I respect her role. Eleanor answered, the distinction deliberate and sharp. Just her role, not the person. Her role is what is relevant to my grandson. Jessica held up the plastic sleeve document. Your Honor, I am entering into evidence Plaintiff's Exhibit 14. It is a draft agreement your lawyers prepared for Elena to sign before she underwent IVF. Mrs. Vance, do you recognize it? Eleanor's eyes narrowed. It was a prudent legal document to protect my family's interests. Let's examine those interests, Jessica said, walking towards the witness box. Clause 4B states that in the event of a separation, Elena would relinquish all primary decision-making rights regarding the child's education and medical care to Richard. Clause 7C states that in the event of your son Richard's death, sole custody of Leo would be transferred to you and your husband. Is that correct? A boy like Leo needs to be raised with a certain structure. We wanted to ensure his legacy. Eleanor sniffed. So a 5-year-old child has a legacy, but his own mother doesn't have rights. Jessica's voice was sharp as a scalpel. Isn't it true, Mrs. Vance, that you have never not for 1 second seen Elena as a member of your family, that you saw her as a biological necessity, a vessel hired to produce a Vance heir, who then had the audacity to believe she was entitled to be a mother? The dam of Eleanor's composure finally broke. Her face contorted in a sneer of pure, unadulterated contempt. Entitled. That girl came from nothing, a suburban family with no name, no connections. She should have been on her knees with gratitude. That my son gave her a life she could only dream of. Leo is a Vance. He has our blood. He needed to be protected from her commonness, her sentimentality. The vicious words echoed in the stunned silence of the courtroom. She had confessed to the core accusation, her arrogance blinding her to the damage she was inflicting. Richard stared at his mother, his face a mask of horror as if seeing her for the first time. The final witness was Richard himself. He walked to the stand like a man heading to his own execution. He was pale, broken. Jessica didn't attack. Her voice was soft, almost sympathetic. Richard, she began, dropping the formal Mr. Vance. Let's go back. Tell me about the day you and Elena found out the IVF had worked. He looked up, his eyes swimming with tears. It was the happiest day of my life, he whispered. We just held each other and cried. And the day Leo was born. When you held him for the first time and you looked at Elena, the woman who had gone through all of that to give you this child, what did you feel for her? A sob escaped Richard's throat. Everything. I felt everything. Gratitude. Awe. So much love I thought my heart would burst. He finally turned and looked at Elena, his face pleading. She was my world. What happened to that man Richard? Jessica asked gently. Where did he go? The man who felt all that love, who saw his wife as his world. How did he become the man who could dismiss her in a bank in front of her son as just a surrogate? Richard's gaze drifted helplessly towards his mother. The answer hung unspoken in the air. He was a man caught in a web woven of money expectation and his mother's suffocating will. I was a coward. He finally wept, his voice cracking. I let her. I let the pressure. I thought it was just easier to say the words to keep the peace. I never imagined it would end like this. I destroyed everything. I destroyed my own family. He buried his face in his hands, his body shaking with racking sobs. It wasn't a performance. It was the complete and utter collapse of a man who had finally realized the catastrophic price of his own weakness. The judge delivered her ruling after a short recess. She removed her glasses and looked down from the bench, her expression one of profound disappointment and disgust. She spoke at length about the sanctity of the parent-child bond and the legal and moral definition of a mother. She addressed Eleanor directly. Mrs. Vance, this court finds your worldview to be not only archaic and offensive, but poisonous. You see your grandson not as a child to be loved, but as a possession to be curated. Your influence is toxic, and I am ensuring it ends today. Then she turned to Richard. Mr. Vance, your tears may be genuine today, but they come far too late. A man's character is not defined by his feelings, but by his actions, especially under pressure. You failed your wife, and you failed your son in the most fundamental way. You allowed your marriage to be denigrated and your wife to be humiliated. You are not at this time a fitting custodian for this child." The final words were delivered with the force of a hammer blow. Therefore, this court awards sole legal and physical custody of the child Leo Vance to his mother, Elena Vance. The temporary support order is made permanent. Mr. Vance will be granted supervised visitation every other Saturday contingent upon proof of his weekly attendance at individual therapy. He is to have no unsupervised contact with the child until such time as a therapist can attest to this court that he understands the gravity of his actions. The gavel fell. The sound was finite. Final. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over Elena so powerfully she felt dizzy. It was over. She had won. She had. Jessica gave her hand a firm, triumphant squeeze. Across the room, Richard sat motionless, a hollowed-out shell. Eleanor, however, rose to her feet, her face contorted with a rage so pure it was terrifying. She shot Elena a look that promised a lifetime of enmity, then turned and swept out of the courtroom a queen dethroned, leaving her broken son behind. Months later, the oppressive gray of the courtroom had been replaced by the warm, buttery yellow Elena had painted the walls of her new two-bedroom apartment. Life was smaller, but infinitely brighter. She had found a job at a vibrant marketing firm, and while the pay was less, the satisfaction of earning her own way was immeasurable. Leo was thriving, his nightmares gone, replaced by the easy laughter of a child who feels secure. One evening, after tucking Leo into bed, Elena's phone buzzed. It was Richard. She hesitated, then answered. His voice was quiet, stripped of its old entitled cadence. "Elena, I've been going to therapy 3 times a week." He paused. "He's making me see things. The way I let my mother's voice become my own. The way I took you for granted. The way I saw your love as an obligation I was owed, not a gift I had to cherish." He took a shaky breath. "I know sorry is a useless word. It doesn't fix anything. But I am sorry, Elena. I'm sorry for the man I became. I'm sorry for not being the man you married." A year ago, his words might have sparked anger, or even a flicker of hope for reconciliation. Now they did neither. Elena felt a sense of calm closure. "I'm glad you're getting help, Richard," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Do it for yourself, and do it so one day you can be the father Leo deserves. Is there any chance for us?" he asked, his voice small. "The us you're thinking of is gone, Richard," she replied without malice. "I'm not Elena Vance anymore. I'm Elena Reyes, and I'm happy." She ended the call, looking around the small, peaceful living room that was all hers. She was not a surrogate. She was not a possession. She was not defined by a man's weakness or a family's arrogance. She was a mother, a creator, a survivor. She had walked through fire and emerged not burned, but forged. And in the quiet of her new life, she was for the first time truly, completely free. Elena's story is a powerful testament to the fact that our worth is not defined by how others see us, but by how we fight for ourselves. A thoughtless, cruel comment was the catalyst. But it was Elena's strength that turned a moment of public humiliation into a declaration of independence. She teaches us that true family isn't about bloodlines or bank accounts, but about love, respect, and the courage to protect that love against all odds. Her battle wasn't just for custody, it was for her soul, and in winning she reclaimed not only her son, but her own identity. The hum of the ultrasound machine was supposed to be the soundtrack to the happiest day of her life. They were about to see their baby for the first time. Her husband, Torrin, a man who could buy cities, held her hand, his grip like ice. As the doctor showed them the tiny beating heart, he leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper meant only for her. What a mistake. He thought his secret was safe. He thought his money could bury the truth. But he never counted on the doctor in that room, a woman who saw more than just a picture on a screen. She saw his lie, and she was about to reveal a shocking truth that would shatter a gilded world forever. The silence in the Bentley was a familiar character in their marriage. It was a heavy, opulent silence, cushioned by hand-stitched leather and the whisper-quiet engine, but a silence nonetheless. Torrin Hawthorne, her husband of 3 years, drove with an unnerving stillness, his eyes fixed on the rain-slicked streets of New York City. His profile, sharp and handsome like a Roman coin, was a mask of serene indifference. To the outside world, he was a titan of industry, the brilliant CEO of Hawthorne Holdings, a man whose Midas touch turned every venture into gold. To Katya, he was becoming a beautiful, unknowable stranger. Their home, a sprawling penthouse on Park Avenue that Torrin called the Observatory, for its floor-to-ceiling windows felt less like a home and more like a museum. Every piece of art, every piece of furniture had been chosen by him. Her life, she was beginning to realize, had also been curated. She had been a promising art historian at the Met when they met. He had swept her off her feet with a whirlwind romance that felt like a fairy tale, dinners in Paris, surprise trips to see the Northern Lights, a blinding diamond that felt more like a beautiful handcuff. He had convinced her to leave her job. An artist needs a patron, Katya, he'd said, and a historian needs to be surrounded by history in the making. Your work is me now. It's us. And she, blinded by love and the sheer force of his personality, had agreed. Now her days were a structured series of luncheons with the wives of his business associates, charity galas, where her only role was to smile, and where his chosen designer, and long quiet afternoons, staring out at a city she lived in but no longer felt a part of. The pregnancy had been her idea, a desperate attempt to build a bridge across the growing chasm between them. She thought a baby, a piece of both of them, would force him to see her again, not just the polished accessory on his arm. When she told him, his reaction was muted. A flicker of something unreadable in his cool gray eyes, a tight smile. A Hawthorne air, he'd said the words tasting of legacy and lineage, not love and joy. We'll need to adjust the nursery plans. The ride to the renowned obstetrician Dr. Anya Sharma was no different. He hadn't wanted to come. It's the 20-week scan, Torrin, she had pleaded. We'll find out the gender. It's important. He had sighed, a long-suffering sound. I have the merger with Sterling Thorne, Katya. It's a delicate phase. This is more important than Sterling Thorne. She had said, a rare spark of defiance flashing within her. His jaw had tightened. Fine. I'll move my meeting with Mr. Sterling. But let's be efficient. Now, in the sterile, quiet room, the scent of antiseptic cleaner sharp in the air, that efficiency was all he radiated. He checked his Patek Philippe watch twice while the technician prepped her. Katya lay on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her, her stomach bare and covered in a cold, clear gel. Dr. Sharma entered with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was a sharp, observant woman in her late 40s with a reputation for being one of the best. Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, ready for the big show. Ready as we'll ever be, Katya said, trying to inject some lightness into the room. Torrin simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the large monitor. The technician, a young woman named Chloe, moved the transducer across Katya's belly. A monochrome world swirled into existence on the screen. It was abstract at first, a collection of shadows and light. Then Chloe pointed, and there we are. See that little flicker? That's the heartbeat. Strong and steady. Tears instantly welled in Katya's eyes. A tiny, pulsating light in the darkness. It was real. A life. Her baby. She turned to Torrin, her heart overflowing, expecting to see a reflection of her own awe. His face was stone. He wasn't looking at the heartbeat. He was looking at the vague outline of a tiny head, the curve of a minuscule spine. His hand, which had been resting limply on hers, tightened. She thought it was a gesture of shared emotion until he leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. The warmth of his breath was a stark contrast to the icy cruelty of his words. It's a mistake. The whisper was so low, so venomous, it was like a snake bite. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd misheard. The hum of the machine, the doctor's cheerful commentary, surely she'd imagined it. But then she saw the subtle shift in his jaw, the cold finality in his eyes as he looked away from the screen and stared at a blank spot on the wall. He had said it. He had looked at their child, their miracle, and declared it a mistake. The air rushed out of her lungs. The tears that had been tears of joy turned to ash, burning her cheeks. Her hand went cold in his. The room which had felt full of life and promise a moment before was suddenly a tomb. Dr. Sharma and Chloe were oblivious, their professional chatter filling the void. Everything looks perfect, Katya. Limbs are all there. Measurements are right on track. Do you want to know the gender? Her voice was a strangled whisper. I don't know. Torin released her hand and stood up, smoothing his bespoke suit jacket. I have to take a call. The Sterling-Thorne merger won't wait. He looked at Dr. Sharma, a mask of polite apology firmly in place. Doctor, please send the bill to my office. Katya, my driver, Thomas, will take you home. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at the screen again. He just walked out, leaving her half-naked on a paper-lined table with the ghost of his words echoing in the silent spaces of her heart. A mistake. Her baby. Their baby. A mistake. Dr. Sharma's cheerful demeanor had vanished. She looked from the empty doorway back to Katya's tear-streaked face. She turned to Chloe. Chloe, could you give Mrs. Hawthorne some privacy to get dressed? And please hold all my calls for the next 15 minutes. Once Chloe had left Dr. Chasur, Sharma pulled a stool over her expression, a mixture of professional concern and something deeper. Something intensely human. She saw the devastation. She had to have seen Torin's chilling detachment. Katya, she said softly, her voice a lifeline. Deep breaths. Can you tell me what happened just now? Katya shook her head, a sob catching in her throat. He said. She couldn't repeat it. Saying it out loud would make it irrevocably real. Dr. Sharma didn't press. She simply placed a comforting hand on Katya's arm. Torin's reaction was unusual, especially for a first-time father. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, held Katya's. I have been a patient of the Hawthorne family's preferred hospital network for years. Torin's medical file is extensive. I took the liberty of reviewing it before this appointment as a matter of due diligence. Katya frowned, confused. His medical file? Why, doctor? Sharma hesitated, as if weighing her next words on a scale of professional ethics versus human decency. There was a notation from his primary care physician, a Dr. Alistair Finch, to cross-reference his records with any spousal maternity care. It was an odd flag, so I looked into it. She took a deep breath. Katya, what I'm about to tell you is a serious breach of patient confidentiality. But given what I just witnessed, I believe it is a matter of your safety and well-being. A cold dread far colder than the ultrasound gel seeped into Katya's bones. What is it? Torin had a severe case of mumps as a teenager? She began, her voice low and steady. It was complicated by a condition called orchitis, inflammation of the testicles. The medical terms meant little to Katya. She was still stuck on the word mistake. The inflammation caused significant irreparable damage. Dr. Sharma continued, her gaze unwavering. We ran a series of tests on him afterward. I have the records here. Katya, Torin Hawthorne is and has been since he was 16 years old completely and irreversibly sterile. His condition is called azoospermia. There is a 0% chance that he can conceive a child naturally. The room began to spin. The black and white image of her baby on the screen seemed to mock her. 0% chance. Sterile. Irreversible. What are you saying? She stammered, her mind refusing to connect the dots. Dr. Sharma's voice was gentle, but her words were devastatingly clear. I'm saying, Katya, that Torin knows he cannot be the father of your baby. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a gunshot. His muted reaction to the pregnancy, his distance, his controlling nature, and the whisper. It's a mistake. The mistake wasn't the baby. The mistake wasn't the pregnancy. The mistake was that she had gotten pregnant at all. Because he knew with absolute scientific certainty that he wasn't the father. He hadn't been accusing the baby of being a mistake. He had been accusing her. The drive home from Dr. Sharma's office was a blur. Thomas Torran's stoic driver navigated through the city traffic with his usual silent competence, occasionally glancing at Katya in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed with what might have been concern. She sat numbly in the back of the Bentley, the plush leather feeling like a cage. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, a gesture that was now fraught with a terrifying new meaning. Dr. Sharma's words echoed in her mind, a relentless, deafening drumbeat. Sterile. Irreversible. 0% chance. The doctor had been kind. She had given Katya a glass of water, a box of tissues, and the space to let the initial shock wash over her. She had also given her a warning. A man like Torran Hawthorne with his resources and his pride. He will not take this revelation lightly, Katya. He is not a man who likes his narrative to be challenged. Be careful. She had printed a copy of the diagnostic report from Torran's file, a document dated over a decade ago, signed by a Dr. Alistair Finch, detailing the diagnosis of azoospermia. Proof is your only power now, she'd said, sliding it into a plain manila envelope. Guard this with your life. Back in the sterile perfection of the observatory, Katya walked through the cavernous living room like a ghost. The Warhol prints on the wall seemed to scream in silent mockery. The cityscape outside, usually a source of comfort, felt alien and menacing. Her whole life, this beautiful, curated life, was a lie, a meticulously constructed sham. She had not cheated on Torran. Not once. The very idea was absurd. She loved him, or she had loved the man she thought he was. Her mind raced frantically, trying to find an explanation. Any explanation other than the one staring her in the face. A miracle. A misdiagnosis. A 1 in a billion chance. But Dr. Sharma's certainty had been absolute. The proof was in the envelope clutched in her hand. If she hadn't cheated and he was sterile, then how was she pregnant? The question was a black hole threatening to swallow her whole. Torran came home late that evening. She heard his keys in the door, the soft click as he locked it behind him. She was sitting in the dark, the envelope on the marble coffee table in front of her. She hadn't moved for hours. He switched on a low lamp and the room was bathed in a soft golden glow. He loosened his tie, his movements fluid and confident. Katya. Why are you sitting in the dark? He didn't sound angry, just weary. The powerful CEO home from a long day of empire building. We need to talk, Torran, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. Can it wait? The Sterling Thorn deal is at a critical juncture. I'm exhausted. No, she said, her voice gaining strength. It can't wait. She gestured to the envelope. I had a very enlightening conversation with Dr. Sharma today, after you left. A flicker of something, anger, fear, crossed his face before being instantly suppressed, replaced by a look of paternalistic concern. He walked over and sat in the armchair opposite her, creating a deliberate distance between them. Are you all right? Is the baby okay? You seemed overwrought at the clinic. The casual cruelty of his words, the way he pretended her distress was just hormonal imbalance, ignited a fire in her chest. The baby is fine. But you know that, don't you? You saw the heartbeat. You also called our baby a mistake. He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. Katya, you misheard. The room was noisy. I was talking about the merger. Don't lie to me, Torran, she said, her voice rising. Don't you dare lie to me. I heard you perfectly, and now I know why you said it. She pushed the envelope across the table. Dr. Sharma showed me this. Your medical file. From when you were 16. He glanced at the envelope but didn't touch it. A slow, cold smile spread across his lips, and the mask of the concerned husband dissolved, revealing the monster beneath. It was a chilling transformation. Dr. Sharma seems to have a problem with patient confidentiality, he said smoothly, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. I'll have my legal team address that with the hospital board. She'll be lucky to practice medicine in this state again. This isn't about Dr. Sharma. This is about you, about us. Katya was on her feet now, her body trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. You're sterile, Torin. You have been for years. You knew you couldn't be this baby's father. You let me believe. You let me think I was going crazy. Why? He stood up, his height and presence suddenly overwhelming in the dimly lit room. He was no longer the charming man she had married. He was a predator. I didn't let you believe anything, Katya, he purred, taking a step towards her. I reacted to a simple biological fact. You came to me, told me you were pregnant. I am your husband. What was I to conclude? The implication hit her like a physical blow. You think I cheated on you. He gave a small, dismissive shrug. The science is quite clear. I cannot have children. You are having a child. The conclusion is elementary, my dear. I was willing for the sake of appearances to overlook your indiscretion, to raise the child as my own, to give it the Hawthorne name, the Hawthorne legacy. All I asked for was your discretion. But you couldn't even manage that. You had to create this drama. It was gaslighting of the highest order. So complete, so audacious that for a moment she almost questioned her own reality. He was twisting her fidelity into a betrayal, her joy into a scandal. He was painting himself as the magnanimous, cuckolded husband willing to forgive her transgression for the sake of his name. The mistake he'd referred to wasn't just her pregnancy, it was her failure to keep the secret of her affair. I never cheated on you, she whispered, horrified. I would never. Then how do you explain it? He shot back, his voice like a whip. A divine, immaculate conception. Did an angel visit you while I was closing the deal in Tokyo? Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. I don't know. That's what I'm asking you, but I know I was faithful to you. He laughed, a short, ugly sound devoid of humor. Fidelity, a quaint concept. It doesn't matter anymore. You've made it matter. By bringing this out into the open, you've forced my hand. He walked to the bar and poured himself a whiskey, his back to her. You will carry this child. When it is born, you will sign over all parental rights to me. I will have a non-disclosure agreement drawn up, a very generous one. You will be well compensated for your services. Then you will disappear. You will move to Europe or California, I don't care. You will never contact me or the child again. Katya stared at him aghast. You want to buy my baby? You want me to give you my child and just leave? It's not your child, he said, turning to face her, his eyes like chips of ice. Genetically, it is half yours. But it will be a Hawthorne. It will be raised as my heir. You are merely the vessel, a very beautiful but ultimately disappointing vessel. The cruelty was breathtaking. He was systematically dismantling her identity, wife, partner, and now mother. She was nothing to him but a means to an end, an incubator for an heir he desperately needed but couldn't produce himself. Her mind reeled back to the central, impossible question. If she hadn't cheated and he was sterile, the answer had to lie somewhere in the space between those two truths. And Torin, in his arrogance, had just given her a clue. He wasn't surprised by the pregnancy. He was angry it had become complicated. He had a plan already in place. This wasn't a shock to him. This was an inconvenience. Her fear began to morph into something else. A cold, hard resolve. He was a liar. He was a manipulator. And he had underestimated her. No, she said the word tasting of newfound power. He raised an eyebrow. No, no. I will not give you my child. I will not disappear. And I will find out the truth. For the first time since she'd met him, Torin Hawthorne looked genuinely surprised. He studied her for a long moment, a predator reassessing its prey. Then he smiled again, that same chilling, empty smile. "You have nothing, Katya," he said softly. "You signed a prenuptial agreement that leaves you with exactly what you came with, which was nothing. You have no job. Your friends are my friends. Your family is—" "Where exactly?" "That brother you never speak to. You live in my home. You eat my food. You wear my clothes. You are nothing without me. Do not make the mistake of thinking you can fight me. It's a battle you will lose. Miserably." He finished his whiskey and placed the glass down with a decisive click. "The offer stands until the day you give birth. Think carefully about your next move, because I will be thinking about mine." He walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the silence. But this time the silence was different. It was no longer empty. It was filled with the clarion call of war. He was right about one thing. She had a brother. A brother she hadn't spoken to in years because he'd seen the monster in Torin long before she had. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. She scrolled through the contacts past the names of society wives and charity organizers until she found the one she was looking for, Liam Vance, her estranged, brilliant lawyer brother, her only hope. She pressed the call button, her heart pounding against her ribs. He answered on the second ring. "Katya." His voice was full of surprise. They hadn't spoken since her wedding day when he'd pulled her aside and begged her not to marry Torin. "He's a shark, Katya. He'll eat you alive." She had called him jealous and dramatic. "Liam," she sobbed, the dam of her composure finally breaking. "Liam, I need your help." "You were right. You were right about everything." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of a chair scraping against a floor. "Katya." "What's wrong? Where are you?" Liam's voice had shed its surprise and was now sharp with concern. "I'm at home." "At the penthouse," she choked out between sobs. "Liam, I'm in trouble. I'm pregnant and Torin—" "I'm on my way," he cut in. No hesitation. "Don't say anything else over the phone. Are you safe right now?" "Is he there?" "He's here, but in his study." "I'm okay for now. Lock your bedroom door. Don't talk to him. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Just hang on, Katya. I'm coming." The line went dead. For the first time in hours, a tiny sliver of hope pierced through Katya's terror. Liam had always been her protector. Growing up, he was the one who'd patched up her scraped knees and stood up to bullies. He'd gone to Columbia Law while she'd pursued art history at NYU. Their paths diverged, but the bond had been unbreakable until Torin had systematically severed it, framing Liam's protectiveness as jealousy and disapproval of his wealth. "He can't stand to see you happy, Katya," Torin had said. And she, a fool, had believed him. True to his word, 30 minutes later the intercom buzzed. It was the front desk. "Mr. Hawthorne, a Mr. Liam Vance is here to see you." The doorman, of course, assumed Liam was here to see the man of the house. Torin's voice came over the internal speaker, cold and clipped. "I'm not expecting a Mr. Vance. Send him away." Her blood ran cold. He was trying to isolate her completely. She grabbed her phone and texted Liam frantically. "He won't let you up. He's trying to block me in." Liam's reply was almost instant. "Go to the service elevator at the end of the hall. Now!" Her heart hammered against her ribs. The service elevator was used by catering staff and maintenance. Torin would never think to monitor it. She slipped out of the living room, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floors. She could hear Torin on a phone call in his study, his voice a low, angry murmur. She crept down the long hallway past the gallery of curated art, her hand still protectively on her belly. The service elevator was utilitarian and stark. She jabbed the button and prayed. The doors slid open with a quiet hum, and there stood Liam. He looked older than she remembered. His sandy hair was a little shorter, and there were fine lines around his eyes. But those eyes were the same, fiercely intelligent and full of a protective warmth that she suddenly realized she had been starved of for 3 years. He pulled her into a hug and she clung to him, the sobs she'd been suppressing finally breaking free. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "I've got you. Let's get out of here." They rode the elevator down in silence. He led her out a back exit into a grimy alley she'd never known existed, a world away from the polished lobby of Park Avenue. The cold night air was a shock to her system. He hailed a yellow cab and soon they were speeding away, the glittering lights of her prison shrinking in the distance. Liam's apartment in Greenwich Village was the complete antithesis of her penthouse. It was cluttered with books, legal pads, and a friendly-looking ficus tree. It smelled of coffee and old paper. It felt real. He sat her down on a worn leather sofa, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and made her a cup of tea. As she sipped the hot, sweet liquid, the story came tumbling out. She told him everything. The ultrasound, Torin's whisper, Dr. Sharma's revelation, the medical report which she'd had the presence of mind to shove into her purse, the horrifying confrontation, the gaslighting, Torin's ultimatum to take her baby and disappear. Liam listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with every word. He took the medical report and read it carefully, his lawyerly gaze missing nothing. When she was finished, a heavy silence filled the room. "That son of a bitch," he said, his voice a low growl. "I knew he was a controlling bastard, but this is sociopathic." He looked at her, his eyes full of a pain that mirrored her own. "Katya, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you." "It's not your fault," she whispered. "He's a master manipulator. He isolated me and I let him." Liam shook his head. "No more. That ends tonight. First things first, he can't force you to give up your child. Parental rights are not a commodity to be bought and sold. His threats are designed to terrorize you into submission. But he has so much power, Liam. The best lawyers, the judges. He told me he'd ruin Dr. Sharma." "He'll try," Liam said, his jaw tight. "But Dr. Sharma has ethics on her side, and a good lawyer, which I will make sure she has, can argue that her duty of care to you, a patient in clear distress, superseded her duty of confidentiality to him, especially when he was using that confidentiality to perpetrate fraud and emotional abuse." He started pacing his mind, clearly working. "The prenup is another issue. Torin's legal team is the best money can buy. They would have made it ironclad. He's right that you'd likely walk away with very little. But we're not going after his money. We're going for something more important, your freedom, your child, and the truth." He stopped and looked at her. "Katya, this is critical. You said you never cheated." "Never," she said with absolute conviction. "I believe you," he said immediately. "Which leaves a gaping hole in the middle of this. You are pregnant. He is sterile. He knew he was sterile. Yet he wasn't entirely surprised by the pregnancy. He was just angry it became public knowledge between you. He already had a plan to take the baby. This suggests he was expecting a child. Just not in this messy way." Her own thoughts, which had been a chaotic storm, began to clear as Liam laid them out with such logical precision. He was expecting a child. She repeated the idea, solidifying. "So, how?" "There are ways," Liam said, starting to list them on his fingers. "Surrogacy, for one. But you're the one who's pregnant, so that's out. Adoption possible, but the timeline doesn't fit. That leaves assisted reproductive technology. IVF. The acronym hung in the air. In vitro fertilization. But IVF, with what she asked, confused. His sperm is non-viable." "Exactly?" Liam said, his eyes gleaming with a hunter's intensity. "It would have to be with donor sperm." "But you would know if you went through an IVF cycle, Katya. The hormone injections, the procedures. You'd know." She shook her head. "No, nothing like that ever happened." They were silent for a moment, both staring at the impossible puzzle. A pregnancy without intercourse with a fertile partner, and without a clinical IVF procedure. It made no sense. Unless, Liam began slowly, his eyes narrowing. Unless the insemination happened without your knowledge. The blood drained from her face. What? How is that even possible? I don't know, he admitted. It sounds like something out of a spy novel. But with a man like Torin, a man with infinite resources and a complete lack of a moral compass, we can't rule anything out. We have to start thinking like he does. Where are the vulnerabilities? Where could he have intervened? He grabbed a legal pad and a pen. Okay, let's be systematic. Think back. Katya, any unusual medical appointments? Procedures? Even a routine checkup that felt off? Any new vitamins or medications he insisted you take? She racked her brain, replaying the last 9 months in her head. Torin was obsessed with their health, but she had always seen it as part of his controlling nature. He'd switched her gynecologist about a year ago to a private clinic. He'd vetted a place called the Westwood Wellness Clinic, run by a Dr. Lena Hansen. It was exclusive, expensive, and catered to the city's elite. She'd had her annual checkup there. There was my annual pap smear at the Westwood Clinic, she said slowly. About 9 months ago. It was routine. Dr. Hansen was very professional, very slick. Anything else? Torin started me on a new regimen of prenatal vitamins about a month before that, she recalled. He had them specially formulated by a compounding pharmacy in Switzerland. He said they were the purest, most effective ones available. Liam wrote it all down. Westwood Wellness Clinic, Dr. Lena Hansen, Swiss vitamins. He looked up at her. It's a long shot, Katya, but this is where we start digging. We need to find out who owns Westwood, who Dr. Hansen is connected to, and we need to get our hands on one of those vitamin bottles. He looked at the blanket draped over her, at her exhausted, tear-stained face. His expression softened. But first you need to rest. You're safe here. Torin doesn't know this address. I moved 3 years ago after the wedding. The unspoken words hung in the air after she chose him over her brother. Tomorrow, Liam said, his voice firm with resolve, we start fighting back, and our first objective is a strategic retreat. You can't go back to the penthouse. We need to get your essential belongings, your passport, your personal documents, anything of sentimental value. We have to do it fast before he realizes you've bolted and locks everything down. The thought of going back into that gilded cage, even for a moment, filled her with dread. But Liam was right. She couldn't let Torin erase every trace of her existence. He'll be at his office all morning, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He has a board meeting. He'll be gone from 8 a.m. to at least noon. Liam nodded. Okay, we have a 4-hour window. We go in, we get your things, and we get out. And then we disappear while I start digging into Mr. Torin Hawthorne's beautifully curated world. I have a feeling we're about to find some very ugly secrets hidden in the fine print. That night, huddled on Liam's sofa, Katya finally slept. It was a restless sleep, punctuated by nightmares of cold whispers and icy smiles. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone in the dark. She had an ally, and they had a plan. The great Torin Hawthorne had made a critical error. He had pushed her so far that she had nothing left to lose, and in doing so, he had transformed his polished, docile wife into an adversary. He had no idea the war he had just started. The next morning, the city was shrouded in a gray, determined drizzle that matched Katya's mood. Liam had already been up for hours, a pot of strong coffee brewing, his laptop open on the dining table, which was now command central. I did a preliminary search on the Westwood Wellness Clinic, he said, handing her a mug. It's a private entity owned by a holding company called Ethelred Capital. Very opaque. But I found something interesting. The listed agent for Ethelred is a law firm, Sloan, Finch & Associates. The name hit her like a jolt. Finch. The doctor who signed Torin's sterility report was Dr. Alistair Finch. Exactly, Liam said, his eyes glinting. It could be a coincidence, but in this world, I don't believe in them. It seems Dr. Finch didn't just diagnose Torrin. He may have stayed in the family's orbit, or at least his firm did. The connection was chilling. The doctor who knew Torrin's most profound secret was linked to the clinic where she had her last checkup before the pregnancy. It felt like a deliberate, carefully woven web. "We have to go," she said, her resolve hardening. "The clock is ticking." Liam had arranged for a discreet car service, not a yellow cab. "Torrin will have eyes," he'd said. "Assume we're being watched." The journey back to Park Avenue was fraught with a new kind of terror. This wasn't her home anymore. It was enemy territory. She was a spy on a mission. As planned, Torrin's Bentley was gone from the private garage. They used the service elevator again. Liam carried 2 large empty duffel bags. "Essentials only, Katya," he cautioned as they stepped into the silent, opulent foyer. "Documents, sentimental items, clothes you can't live without. Nothing he can track. Leave the jewelry he bought you. It's just another set of chains." The penthouse was eerily quiet. It was as if the argument from the night before had been sucked into the expensive upholstery, leaving behind a charged, toxic residue. While Liam stood watch at the door, Katya flew into action. She went straight to their bedroom, a vast space of cool grays and chrome that had always felt more like a hotel suite than a sanctuary. She grabbed her passport, her birth certificate, and a small box of old family photos from her bedside table. She packed jeans, sweaters, and sensible shoes, the clothes of the woman she used to be before Torrin had dressed her up like a doll. She left the designer gowns and jewel-encrusted heels hanging in the closet like the shed skin of a former life. Then her eyes fell on the ensuite bathroom. On the marble countertop sat a sleek silver bottle. "Vie éternelle prenatal formula," the elegant script read. "Torrin's specially compounded Swiss vitamins." Her heart pounded. She grabbed the bottle along with a sealed, unopened one from the medicine cabinet. This could be the proof they needed. Her final stop was Torrin's study. It was a place she rarely entered, his sanctum sanctorum. The room was dark paneled in mahogany and smelled of leather and his expensive cologne. It was the heart of his empire and his secrets. "Katya, we need to go," Liam whispered from the doorway. "Just 1 minute," she said, her instincts screaming at her. She went behind his massive desk. She didn't know what she was looking for. His computer was password protected, but in his top desk drawer beneath a stack of neatly organized papers was a slim leather-bound folio. It wasn't a company document. It looked private. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The first page was a contract, a service agreement between Torrin Hawthorne and a company she'd never heard of, the Genesis Clinic. Her eyes scanned the legalese until they landed on a phrase that made the air freeze in her lungs. "For services rendered in the procurement and cryopreservation of donor gametes." Donor gametes. Sperm. She flipped the page. It was a profile. A donor profile. Donor 734. It listed his physical characteristics: height, hair color, eye color, all remarkably similar to Torrin's. It listed his academic achievements and a clean bill of health. But the name was redacted, blacked out with a thick marker. Then she saw the payment schedule, a series of large wire transfers from a private account of Torrin's to the Genesis Clinic. And below that, a second set of payments. A monthly retainer paid to a woman, Serafina Dubois. The memo line for each payment was the same consulting fee. Who was Serafina Dubois? A consultant for what? And why was Torrin paying a fertility clinic for donor sperm when he was supposedly trying to have a baby with his wife, Katya? Now Liam's voice was urgent. She snapped a picture of every page with her phone, her hands shaking so badly the first few were blurry. She shoved the folio back in the drawer and ran out of the study, her heart threatening to beat its way out of her chest. As they were about to leave, the main elevator dinged. Her blood turned to ice. It couldn't be Torrin. He was at his board meeting. The elevator doors slid open and a woman stepped out. She was in her late 60s, impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, her silver hair styled in a flawless chignon. Her face was a mask of aristocratic disdain. It was Jessamine Hawthorne, Torrin's mother, She surveyed the scene, Katya clutching a purse, Liam holding 2 duffel bags, and her thin lips curled into a semblance of a smile. It didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Well, well," she said, her voice as crisp and brittle as old money. "Leaving so soon, Katya? And with your brother, the little radical?" I see Torrin's assessment of the situation was, as always, astute. Liam stepped in front of Katya protectively. "Mrs. Hawthorne, we're leaving." Jessamyn's gaze swept over him dismissively before landing back on Katya. "Are you foolish little girl. Did you really think you could just walk away? Did you think my family would allow a complication like you to disrupt everything?" "This has nothing to do with you, Jessamyn," Katya said, finding her voice. "Oh, but it has everything to do with me," she replied, taking a step closer. The scent of her expensive perfume, Jean Patou's Joy, filled the air, a cloying, suffocating fragrance. A legacy is at stake. The Hawthorne name, my grandchild. Her eyes dropped to Katya's stomach, and her expression softened into something that for a terrifying moment looked like warmth. "You don't have to run, dear. We can be reasonable. Torrin is angry, yes. He is proud. But he can be managed. I can talk to him." She opened her handbag and pulled out a checkbook. "You are carrying a Hawthorne. That makes you important to us. But you are not equipped to be its mother. Give us the child. I will personally see to it that you are set up for life. A new name, a beautiful home in the south of France. Anything you desire. You can live out your days in comfort. All you have to do is sign the papers after the birth and walk away." It was the same offer Torrin had made, but coated in a veneer of matriarchal concern that was somehow more repulsive. She wasn't just offering to buy the baby. She was offering Katya a golden cage in exchange for her soul. "He is not a Hawthorne," Katya said, her voice shaking with rage. "I don't know who he is, but he is not a Hawthorne, and he is my son. Mine. He is not for sale." Jessamyn's mask of civility crumbled. Her face hardened, her eyes flashing with a venomous fury that was so much like her son's. "You ungrateful little tramp! You come into my son's life with nothing, and this is how you repay him, by opening your legs to some stranger and trying to pass off your bastard child as his." "That's enough," Liam said, his voice deadly calm. "We're done here." He took Katya's arm and steered her toward the service elevator. Jessamyn's voice followed them down the hall, shrill and laced with panic. "You won't get away with this. Torrin will find you. He will take that child from you, and he will leave you with nothing. You will be ruined. Do you hear me? Ruined." The service elevator doors slid shut, cutting off her tirade. Katya collapsed against the wall, trembling uncontrollably. She had known Torrin was a monster, but now she knew the monstrosity was inherited. The entire Hawthorne family was rotten to the core. They didn't care about a child. They cared about an heir, a commodity. Back in the car, speeding away from that life for good, Katya showed Liam the photos on her phone. He scrolled through them, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The Genesis Clinic," he muttered. "Donor 734. Serafina Dubois." He looked up at her, his eyes dark with a chilling realization. "Katya, this is darker than we imagined. He wasn't just hiding his sterility. He had a plan, an elaborate premeditated plan to create an heir using a donor, and he was going to pass the child off as his own." "But how did I get pregnant?" she cried, the question still tormenting her. "If I didn't have IVF, how did the donor sperm?" Liam looked at the picture of the vitamin bottle, then back at the legal documents on the phone. "I don't know for sure," he said slowly, his voice grim. "But I have a sickening theory. It's called cryptic insemination. It's highly unethical, illegal in most places, and almost impossible to prove. But for a man with Torrin's resources and connections to Dr. Finch's network and a private clinic, he wouldn't need your consent if he could bypass it entirely." The implication was horrifying. The vitamins from Switzerland. the private clinic. Dr. Hansen. Had her routine checkup been anything but? Had she been inseminated like livestock without her knowledge or consent? It was a violation so profound she couldn't wrap her mind around it. Now we have a name. Liam said, his voice like steel. Serafina Dubois. She's the key. We find her. We find out her role in all this, and we find out the identity of donor 734. He looked at Katya, his hand covering hers. This is our new mission. We're not just escaping Katya. We're hunting. They went to ground, retreating to a secluded family cabin in the Catskills. The isolation was a balm to Katya's fractured nerves. While she focused on her health, Liam converted the rustic living room into a war room. He hired a sharp private investigator, an ex-cop named Marcus Thorne, who began charting the dark constellation of Torrens' deceit, the doctors, the clinics, and the mysterious Serafina Dubois. The first breakthrough came from the unopened bottle of Swiss vitamins. Liam had it sent to a lab for analysis. The results were sickening. It's worse than we thought, Liam said, his face grim as he read the report. The pills weren't just nutrients. They contained a powerful sedative and a cocktail of hormones designed to optimize fertility. The clinical words painted a horrifying picture. He was drugging me, Katya whispered, the violation stealing her breath. She had been an unwilling participant in her own pregnancy. Her anger, once a spark, now hardened into cold, unbreakable resolve. Soon after Marcus Thorne's investigation bore fruit, the money trail laundered through shell corporations led him to Serafina Dubois. He found her address in a discreet Soho apartment building. I have to see her, Katya declared, her voice firm. The time for hiding was over. They approached with caution. While Liam and Marcus waited nearby, Katya went to the building alone, her heart a steady drum against her ribs. She buzzed the apartment. My name is Katya Hawthorne, she said into the intercom, her voice clear. We need to talk about Torren. After a tense silence, the lock clicked open. The woman who answered the door. Serafina was not the cold accomplice Katya had envisioned. She was elegant, with intelligent, weary eyes that held a universe of regret. Mrs. Hawthorne, she said softly, I knew this day would come. Please come in. Inside the minimalist apartment, the truth finally spilled out. I was a geneticist. Serafina began, her hands trembling. I ran a fertility clinic called Genesis. Torren came to me years ago, obsessed with having a biological heir he knew he could never produce. When I told him it was impossible, he changed the plan. He wanted a child that appeared to be his, using a donor who was a perfect physical match. Donor 734. Katya breathed. Serafina nodded. But that wasn't enough for him. He insisted the child be carried by you to complete the illusion. I told him it was illegal, a monstrous ethical breach. But he had leveraged my brother's gambling debts. Torren paid them, and in return he owned me. He forced me to orchestrate everything. The drugged vitamins, the procedure. Dr. Hansen at the Westwood Clinic was one of his puppets, too. Her voice broke. I am so sorry. I've lived with this guilt every day. The confession was damning, but one final crucial question remained. Who was the donor? Katya asked, her voice trembling. Who is my baby's father? A fresh wave of fear washed over Serafina's face. Torren's cruelty has layers, she explained. He wanted the donor to be someone he could control completely, an insurance policy. He chose his younger brother, Michael. The name landed with the force of a physical blow. Michael Hawthorne, the disowned artist, the family disgrace. Torren despised him, Serafina whispered. He found Michael, offered him life-changing money to be the donor, and forced him to sign an NDA and disappear. It was his ultimate twisted victory to use the genetics of the brother he hated to create the heir he would raise as his own. Armed with Serafina's sworn affidavit, Liam's team moved swiftly. They located Michael Hawthorne living a quiet, anonymous life in a small town on the coast of Maine. He was a painter of melancholic seascapes, a man haunted by a deal he had never fully understood. Katja traveled to Maine to meet him. Standing on a wind-swept cliff overlooking the Atlantic, she saw a man who shared Torin's frame, but none of his menace. His eyes were kind. They were her baby's eyes. "I am so sorry," Michael said, his voice thick with regret. "I never knew." In that moment, standing beside the stranger, who was the biological father of her child, Katja felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. He was not a ghost. He was family. The final confrontation was not a dramatic showdown, but a swift legal execution. Liam presented Torin's lawyers with their arsenal: Serafina's testimony, the lab reports, Michael's statement, and the threat of criminal charges for assault and unlawful insemination. The story, if made public, would not just tarnish the Hawthorne name, it would obliterate the entire empire. Jessamine Hawthorne attempted a desperate smear campaign, but against the mountain of evidence it was useless. Faced with total ruin, Torin folded. The divorce was quiet and absolute. The fraudulent prenup was voided, and Katja accepted a settlement that would ensure her child's security. She refused to take a penny more of his blood money. Torin relinquished all paternal rights in exchange for their silence on Michael's identity, a final pathetic attempt to control a narrative he had already lost. Katja walked away from the marriage with her freedom, her dignity, and the precious life inside her. 2 months later, she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy boy. She named him Liam after the brother who had saved her, and gave him the last name Vance. He had his Uncle Michael's kind eyes and his mother's resilient spirit. Michael became a quiet, loving presence in their lives, his art slowly filling with a light that had long been absent. Katja never saw Torin or Jessamine again. The last she heard, Hawthorne Holdings was in turmoil, and Torin had become a recluse in his golden penthouse, a king ruling an empire of shadows. He had his legacy, but he was utterly alone, having lost the future he tried so desperately to steal. Katja, however, had found hers. It wasn't a life of opulence, but it was real, and it was free. Katja's journey started with a shocking betrayal in the cold, sterile light of an ultrasound room, and ended with her reclaiming her strength, her identity, and her future. She escaped a gilded cage, exposed a web of lies that ran deeper than she could ever have imagined, and fought for the most precious thing in her life, her child. Her story is a powerful testament to resilience, the unbreakable bond of family, and the fact that truth is a power that even a millionaire's money cannot suppress. What would you have done in Katja's position? Let us know in the comments below.